Hi and welcome back to the garden. I have finally managed to dig up my dahlias this week, and in its place I'm going to plant my garlic. I have to split the cloves up first. These are all the bulbs that I dug up in July. We have music in this one and then Mennonite over here, and these are both pretty big varieties. I'm just pulling the cloves off of the main stem and splitting them up. This is the biggest clove I can find. This is the music variety. And a bulb itself is pretty big too, but the bulbs only have 4 cloves in it usually. A few of them have 5. One here that has 3, but that's fine. I much prefer the bigger cloves anyway. Here is one of the Mennonite. Similar in size. Still a pretty big clove. I've seen bigger than this. I haven't looked. That's going to be a good one. This one is almost as big as the elephant garlic. There is a clove of the Mennonite. So let's find, where was my biggest music clove? Right here. This is Mennonite and this is music. Not all that much difference. So I will show you my dahlias in a minute. I got them dug up yesterday. They are sitting in one of my raised beds right now, just drying off. And I have decided not to divide them this fall. It was a terrible year for dahlias, not just for me. I have heard of growers all across the country. We are Canadian, all across Canada and the US had a terrible year for dahlias. And here I thought it was just my own bad soil. So I was just happy that I got about a month of flowers. And all that I was hoping for out of the dahlias, once I realized that it was going to be a terrible year for flowers, is that I would be able to store the tubers. So I planted mostly individual tubers, some small clumps that I bought new, and almost all of them produced a nice little clump of tubers that I should be able to store. So I think that's enough of that one. These bulb crates behind me are going to be what I store my dahlias in. I have 32 and I started with 36. So yeah, about 4 of them were rotten when I pulled them out of the ground. And I could kind of tell by looking at the plants before I dug them up because they were pretty sad. So I am happy to at least have salvaged them so that I can keep them and then plant them for another year. So once I get this done, we'll amend the soil a little bit. I put 1 wheelbarrow load of homemade compost on it already. I'm going to add a couple bags of manure. There, I think that's enough. This is Mennonite and this is music. It's a little bit chilly today, but the sun is nice and warm. Having said that though, the bed we're going to be working on is in the shade. Oh well. So we are right next to the greenhouse, and this is actually one of my beds that I planted up with tulips, but I've set my dahlia clumps on top just to dry out for a day because the soil was quite moist. So pretty shortly I'm going to put those in bulb crates. But here's the bed next to it where the dahlias were actually growing. After I dug them up, I put a couple of inches of compost on top, and I've raked it in a little bit. You don't need to dig it all the way down. Nature will take care of that. But we're going to mulch it on top with a couple bags of manure when we are done. I have the bamboo cane in the middle, just marking what I think is the middle. I know I did not measure it. And we're going to lay out the bulbs on top in a grid and see how many we can fit. I'm going to plant the Mennonite garlic first, which is the bigger of the 2 varieties. And I'm just going to space these about 6 inches apart on a grid, and then we'll see what that looks like. I'm just going to set these on top of the soil before I plant them in so that I can see how many I have. I am done with the Mennonite, and I ended up with 9 rows of 9, so 81 separate cloves if my math is right. And I ended up going a lot closer than 6 inches because it looked a lot further apart than I planted it the last couple of years. If I remember right, 6 inches is usually the rule with garlic. Molly, she's not very good at balancing anymore. Thank you for not walking through there, thank you. So according to most sources, this is way too close to plant garlic. This is more in the 3 to 4 inch range. But you know what? I have done this for 3 years in a row now, and they always come out fantastic. So I'm gonna keep doing that. So I've just laid them out, which means I need to actually get them in the ground next. I am just taking them. Luckily, the soil is soft enough that I'm just taking them and pushing them. And I will be topping this bed up when I'm done by at least a couple more inches. So I am making sure that there's at least a couple of inches of soil on top of these bulbs. General rule is whatever the depth of the bulb, add twice that in soil. So let's say this bulb is 1 inch tall, then the bottom of it would be 3 inches below soil level, or the top would be 2 inches below soil level. That's one variety done. Last year, I planted 40. This year I have 81. I have 17 bulbs of the music left, and I think about the same for the Mennonite. And that's lots because we have some elephant garlic in the house too. So this should be the perfect amount to store to use between now and when these are ready to harvest in late spring next year. So I've topped that up just with bagged cow manure, and you guys know how much I hate using things that come in plastic bags, but as much as I would prefer to use all my own homemade compost, I just can't produce enough to mulch all of my gardens. So I tend to save my homemade compost mostly for vegetables. I know this is garlic, but there's a little bit on here also. And I will be using some of my leaf mold on here too, just to top it up and give it a little extra protection over the winter. So next we have to go pack away the dahlias. Now I have a bunch of these bulb crates, and I also have the flyers that we get every week that we never read. I'm not worried about whether or not these are completely dry because if anything, our dahlias dry out in the winter. We don't have to worry about them rotting. It is really dry here in the winter time because it gets so cold. And I'm gonna see how many I can fit. I have lots of bulb crates, but I like to use them for seedlings in the spring. And I'm not gonna do a thing to these except jam them in here. And maybe top them with something. So the moisture that's left in this should be a good thing, really. You have to keep in mind that these are perennials in warmer zones. We are zone 6 and they will definitely not overwinter, but where they do overwinter, they don't stay bone dry while they're in the ground. They're gonna sit there in cold, wet ground for the winter and most of the time come through perfectly fine. I mean, unless it's flood situation. I would rather these be a little on the damper side. So when I took them out this spring, they were so completely desiccated. And I was surprised, a lot of them came through, but some of them didn't. So that's 8. It's a good start. Some of these are pretty small. So I'm pretty confident I can fit 8 in each of these crates. And I have 32. which means 4 crates. That would be perfect. But while I'm doing this, I should mention that I did get the saffron planted. I planted them in pots. They are in the greenhouse. So if we have a minute, that's 8. If we have a minute when I'm done, I will show you before I go inside. You may have noticed these are not labeled. A lot of them didn't bloom. I wasn't that great about labeling them when I planted them out because I figured I would see the flowers when they bloomed, but they didn't all bloom. So I'm not going to worry about that. I only have 32. I know which varieties I have. So I'll know when they bloom next year. I might be able to get away with only 1 more crate. Oh, that one's rotten. Gross. Never assume you can pull off a rotten tuber with your bare hands. Oh, God. I think that must be the mother tuber. Maybe I'll let this one sit out and dry just a little bit longer. There we go. All right. The rest of those feel good, so that should dry. That's the last one. Now that I have those packed away, let's pop into the greenhouse for a second. I'll show you that saffron. I've been clearing out the greenhouse little by little. These pots here have some bulbs that I ran out of space for. I stuck some eucalyptus in that one. The bananas have been living in here. I took out most of the peppers and tomatoes. There's still a few on the back wall. But here's where I put the saffron. So it has been growing pretty quick since I potted up. So I expect to see some flowers in here before too long. Little green shoot right there. So that's all for today, guys. I'm going to trim up those dahlias and get those stored away for winter. And we'll make sure we check on those throughout the winter too to make sure they're not drying out too much. But for now, I'm going to say thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll be working in the greenhouse next week with a few more projects. And I will see you next time. Hello, Molly. No, Molly.